Let's move on to this feud between Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Jill Stein. Ryan, do you want to set the table for us on this? Because it's sort of straight out of your book.
Well, so AOC was doing an Instagram Live and taking questions from her audience, and one of them was basically, what should I say to my friends who are considering voting Green Party or thinking about voting for Jill Stein? Let's roll the AOC clip that kicked this off.
You are the leader of your party. And if you run for years and years and years and years and years in a row, and your party has not grown, and you don't add city council seats, and you don't add down ballot candidates, and you don't add state electeds, that's bad leadership. And that to me is what's upsetting. Because if you have been your party's nominee for 12 years in a row, 4 years ago and 4 years before that and 4 years before that, and you cannot grow your movement pretty much at all and can't pursue any successful strategy, and all you do is show up once every 4 years to speak to people who are justifiably pissed off, but you're just showing up once every 4 years to do that, you're not serious. You're not, to me, it does not read as authentic. It reads as predatory. I'm sorry. I'm just saying it.
And let's roll Jill Stein's response from an airport here.
Jill here. I'm about to board, but very quickly, I just wanted to thank AOC Pelosi so very much for her very authentic concern about growing green power. Clearly, AOC is the attack dog du jour, and the Democrats are running scared, and they should be, because who wants to support a genocide? Who wants to vote for a genocide? And if there's anything that's predatory here, it's saying that your candidate is working tirelessly for a ceasefire when actually they are actively funding and arming genocide and actually refusing to even consider an arms embargo, which would bring the genocide to a screeching halt. AOC, who's supposed to be in leadership of the Democratic Party, it's amazing if she doesn't know about the anti-democratic tactics and strategies that the Democratic Party uses to crush and silence political opposition.
And to take it to another level, the DNC is now attacking Jill Stein, if you can put it this element here. So Jill Stein went down to support three black nationalist activists who are charged with acting as agents of Russia. She went down to support them. The DNC spokesperson said, Jill Stein is a useful idiot for Russia after parroting Kremlin talking points and being propped up by bad actors in 2016. She's at it again. Jill Stein won't become president, but her spoiler candidacy that both the GOP and Putin have previously shown interest in can help decide who wins. A vote for Stein is a vote for Trump, which is that is the, like, that's the oldest line in the book from mainstream parties towards third-party candidates, that a vote for X is actually a vote for Y. As somebody on the outside, when you watch those three different clips, what was your reaction to them?
I mean, I think Jill Stein got the better of AOC in that exchange because on the question of, like, they're both talking about what they believe is genocide, so it's pretty black and white when you can spit back at AOC that she's on the side of the party that's saying Joe Biden is working tirelessly or Kamala Harris is working tirelessly for a ceasefire. I mean, that felt like kind of a slam dunk, even though obviously Jill Stein, AOC is correct that Jill Stein has not found much of a constituency over her many years in politics, but where it's somewhat I don't know if disappointing is the right word, but somewhat frustrating to hear from AOC, who I disagree with on most things, but so thoroughly enjoyed her defeat of Joe Crowley, is, you know, that's not all Jill Stein's fault. There are a lot of other forces that AOC should theoretically be opposed to that were gatekeeping Jill Stein. I don't think Jill Stein is like a brilliant, once-in-a-generation politician or is anyone that could turn out to be like a Ross Perot level third-party candidate. I just don't find her that compelling. I don't think a lot of other people find her that compelling. There are many people who do, but not enough to obviously become viable. There are, though, a lot of gatekeepers that are pushing to ensure people like Jill Stein aren't viable. And you'd think AOC would have some sympathy because her entire sort of Instagram video, her entire argument in that Instagram video was sort of saying, if you're not finding, it was kind of smug, right? It's like, if you're not finding a constituency, then that's on you. It's like, well, it's probably also on a lot of the factors you say you don't like too.
It is, but you have to, you if you're one person, you work with the world you've got. One correction to AOC's argument there, it's actually Howie Hawkins who was the Green Party nominee in 2020. If
Classic
you remember,
Ryan Grimm.
You remember Howie Hawkins?
No.
Which goes to the point. Like, nobody even knows who the Green Party nominee was, for instance, in 2020.
Yeah.
Like, we know Ralph Nader in 2000 was the Green Party nominee.
Pretty much
the last time they were kind of relevant. So it was Jill Stein in 2016, Hawkins in 2020. Hawkins, a lot of Greens were upset with Hawkins because they thought that he didn't kind of challenge the duopoly enough and kind of made way in different states for Biden to take on Trump. Because there is this perennial concern that as a third party does better, let's say like the Greens in 2000, a substantial number of those voters then get concerned, oh, we did better, the party did not improve, did not move our direction, and now we're getting blamed for spoiling the election.
Right.
And then it drains support from them again in the future. I've got my own complicated Green history. I was actually a Green Party member.
Least surprising information I've ever received.
In New York. Shout out to Paul Gilman, who invited me to join the Queen's Green Party back in 1999, 2000. I even went to, with a convoy of buses, I literally went to the Green Party convention.
Just Doc Martens everywhere.
In 2000.
Yeah.
Door knocking, volunteered at this Madison Square Garden rally where he packed the entire event. So every single argument that anybody could make for the Green Party,
you're sympathetic to.
I made myself,
right,
in a louder and more obnoxious way, many, many times over. And the basic arguments are there's no difference between the two parties. And then the second argument is by building third party power, you're going to kind of force the Democrats to move,
be better,
to move in your direction.
Yeah.
And we can take each one of those. In 2000, so the Greens also have this thing that they do where they say, and I did it myself, that, okay, look, if you say, look, Ralph Nader got X thousands of votes in Florida, and that swung the election to Bush. The Greens, and go scroll down to the comment section, you'll see them doing it right now. The Greens will say that's absolutely not true.
Do the math.
That they were registered Democrats who ended up voting for George Bush, and that's the fault of Democrats. Those are Southern Democrats, who were actually Republicans, who were always going to vote for Republicans. There were definitely, it was 537 votes in the end separated Gore and Bush. You just have to say, okay, there were tens of thousands of people who voted for Nader who, if he wasn't running, they would have voted for Al Gore. That's just a fact. And to me, as a third-party supporter, the proper answer is not to split hairs about this and argue that, no, it didn't actually have an effect. You have to own it.
Yeah, right, because it's your argument.
That's your argument. Your argument
there's no difference.
There's no difference.
Yeah.
And it's good. Whatever, we're going to vote for this person come what may.
Yeah.
And there's no difference anyway. And then as soon as it has some impact on the real world, they run from any responsibility from it. And so then a couple things happen after 2001.
Which implies you don't like the consequences.
Right.
Even though you were threatening those very consequences as a good thing.
Right, exactly. So I have much deeper respect for the argument that, yeah, that's right. It did cost him. And you know what? Democrats should have been a better party.
Right.
And if they were a better party, then we wouldn't have run and he wouldn't have gotten as much support.
Or Al Gore should have earned those votes.
Nobody's born with the right to having you vote for them.
Right.
Those are better arguments to me on a moral level.
That's a great point.
Than to say, it didn't actually. And so you get this from Greens all the time. Actually, it didn't matter. Like the thing that I talk about all the time, my choice to vote for third party, doesn't actually mean anything.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, then why are you talking about it constantly if it didn't actually mean anything? So after 2000, you get September 11th happens, Bush is in office, he invades Iraq. And so a lot of people, including myself, were confronted with the question. Now, I voted in New York, didn't matter.
Well, also there's the question of would Al Gore have done the same thing?
Right. I think the answer is no. I think in order for the U.S. to invade Iraq, you need the neocons in positions of power to move those levers.
I mean, the George W. Bush going from saying we're going to end Middle East interventionism to, championing Middle East interventionism.
Right, but it was his Vice President Dick Cheney and his Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld and Paul Wolfowitz and that claque of people really kind of did a lot of internal organizing to make sure that happened. You can read Bob Woodward's book about 9/11. Like within a day or two of the attack on the World Trade Center, Rumsfeld is saying we need to invade Iraq because there aren't enough targets in Afghanistan. And they immediately start laying the groundwork for that. And this was a particular set of people who had a particular vision.
It was the neoconservatism gets thrown around a lot, but it is a very specific, like in its most literal sense, there is a very specific sort of group of people that it refers to.
These were the intellectual leaders of it, and they were in the exact right positions of power to kind of jam it into happening.
That said, the Greens, like yourself, at that very moment, may have had a good case to own, frankly, that personnel in an Al Gore administration continued from the Clinton administration could have made some of the very same errors. I'm not saying that's absolutely accurate. I'm just saying there was the Green case that both parties are the same through the lens of the Iraq War
made sense.
or the response to 9/11. Not a terrible argument because there is some overlap between Clinton neoconservatism and ultimately what became Bush neoconservatism. Some important differences too, but it's hard to say.
Yeah, and that gets to the more difficult question of today, because I think
yes.
I think back then it was clear the Republicans were much more this is America. Both parties have like enormous numbers of warmongers in them. On the scale of warmongers in 2000, Republicans had the neocons. They had the aggressive militarism of Reaganism still kicking, and Democrats had let's say half of that. Today, I think if you're asking about workers, unions, on the economy, on domestic policy, I genuinely do think Democrats are better for workers than Republicans are today. When it comes to American militarism abroad and foreign policy, I can't say that for sure.
And don't you think AOC is saying that? I mean, she obviously
AOC,
is.
I mean, AOC is a Democrat,
right.
and she's saying Democrats are better than Republicans, and any Democrat ought to say that. But when it comes to foreign policy, Trump could be a complete madman his second term, who knows? But we know that Democrats have embraced a militarism and a hawkish foreign policy that is frightening.
And does it, from that perspective, make them better?
So then you're asking yourself a real question.
It's a lesser of two evils.
You've got two parties. Which one is better or worse on the particular issue that I care about more?
Right.
Like I think it's clear if it's domestic policy, it's Democrats. Like I don't think there's any question about that right now. This realignment is fascinating. 4 years, 8 years from now, we might have a different answer to that question. Foreign policy, they might be better, but they might not. It's not as obvious a question to me.
Yeah, I agree.
As it used to be.
Because there are wars happening in both parties right now over who gets to control foreign policy. That's clearly happening. I think it's more interesting right now on the Republican side because there are people who have genuinely heterodox views on foreign policy that are starting to look like they're coming out ahead in tug of war. J.D. Vance is one of them. That doesn't seem like it's happening as much on the left, although Ilhan Omar is someone who's certainly ascendant and has staked out a position actually directly during DNC week against AOC.
And to me, those are the real questions that you have to ask yourself. And if you notice, what's not in there is the third party stuff.
Right.
Or in particular, the Green Party. the Green Party has just done a deplorable job of growing power at the local level and at the state and at the federal level.
But some of that is clearly the fault of gatekeeping on behalf of the DNC operatives and the media.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, they're not entirely wrong about being marginalized by, the pro lowercase d democracy factions in America.
Yes.
Factions, but
people kind of sometimes make the mistake of assuming that a political party that is named the Democrats would support democracy.
Big mistake.
Big mistake.
Huge.
They don't. They support the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
And so, yes, whatever is in the interest of the Democratic Party, that's what they're going to do. And if that means trying to kick the Greens off the ballot, and it's awfully hypocritical, but it's exactly what you would expect of them. The fundamental problem that any third party has is the system that we have, which is this, it's not parliamentary. In Europe and some other places around the world, you win 7% of the vote, you get 7% of the seats in parliament, and then you join a coalition, and then you can, that's the leverage that you have. Here, our coalitions are formed ahead of time, and then it's a first past the post. Whoever gets, not even a majority, whoever gets more votes. That's why, like, Bill Clinton could win with 30-some percent, or 41%, whatever he had in 1992, because Ross Perot drained out 19%. And so that means that a voter going into the polls, by the time they get into the booth, knows it's either going to be this person or this person. And so all of the different lawfare and legal challenges and gatekeeping that the media does to the Greens and to the Libertarians and other third parties, like even RFK Jr., like that hurts them a lot, but nothing hurts them more than just the fundamental design of the system we have. Because people go in and they want their vote to count between one party or the other.
Yeah. And that's what's interesting about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's response. She could have said, she could have expressed any sort of empathy for that perspective, and went, I think, instead with the sort of smug dunk, which I get, because to the point that you're making, and as we're talking about this, I find it so interesting, there are, there's a real blame on the Greens for not being more compelling to the average American voter. That, there's something that they haven't tapped into. There are real failures on their part. There are things that they can do better. I get that. I just would think, as somebody who's sort of sympathetic to the anti-establishment movements on either the left or the right, that you would be, your priority would be saying, like, hey, I hear you, agree with you.
Well, she did say at the beginning, which we didn't play in that clip, she said at the beginning, look, I'm not talking about the people themselves who are considering voting for Jill Stein. She's like, look, I get that, because the parties suck. And frankly, like, she went up on stage and said Kamala Harris is working tirelessly to end a ceasefire, while Kamala Harris's administration is sending weapons to Israel. And while Netanyahu is using the Biden administration's support of Netanyahu to fight off pressure from his own coalition to reach a deal. We are actively thwarting a deal, not working tirelessly to get one. So, yeah, we can all understand why somebody would not want to vote for one of these two parties. So she's not talking about those voters themselves. She's saying that people like Stein herself are the ones that are being predatory.
Well,
and one other point on the Greens. Ask yourself, why did Cornel West run for the Green Party nomination, spend about 3 weeks looking at the mess that the Green Party had become,
and say no,
and decide that he wasn't going to run anymore? And we can say, okay, maybe it's not their fault, et cetera, because of all the structural problems that they have. Anybody who's active in the Green Party knows the Green Party's a mess. It's a complete and total mess.
It's the same thing with the Libertarians. I mean, and both of us know this. It's like their fringe political movements are often led by eccentric characters who are already fighting the Sisyphean battle against the system that is designed to crush them. But anybody who is willing to expend the tireless effort that it involves to fight that Sisyphean battle, more often than not, is eccentric, and more often than not the best organizer in the world. It's like a lot of very interesting principled people in green circles and libertarian circles, and those spaces get really, really messy. I mean, the internecine.
I bet on the libertarian side, it's the same, that it becomes a lifestyle for people.
100%.
That it's a social thing.
It's happening right now.
Now, now, a lot of Democrats, like the ones who go to the convention as like delegates.
Same thing.
That's a lifestyle thing for them too. They just like being Democrats. They go to the county meetings.
Yep.
Like that's it. It's what they do for their community. The difference there is that they might win some elections sometimes. With Greens and Libertarians, it just becomes like this is my identity. This is the thing I do.
Yeah. And so as we're saying this, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Is staying on the Michigan ballot, which is actually fairly huge news because there were a lot of voters that he appealed to. I mean, we're getting into Nader territory potentially with something like Michigan right now. There were a lot of voters he appealed to who will not be persuaded to vote for Donald Trump because they were double haters, and they are not going to, sort of along the lines of what we talked about with in the debate we hosted with Michael Tracy and an RFK Jr. field organizer, former, last week. There's just a whole lot of people that cannot be persuaded to vote for Donald Trump. They are the sort of RFK Jr. Green equivalent. Both parties are the exact same thing. And when you are in a race that could get, 500 and something votes in Florida in 2000, when you're in a race that could be just as close as that one, and the Electoral College is on the line in states like Michigan, having his name on the ballot is, for people who, don't pay super close attention to politics and just want to cast a protest vote, that's really dangerous for the Trump campaign. And Mark Cuban tweeted, who helped pay for the lawsuit that got RFK Jr. Cornel West on the North Carolina ballot? Me. He said, I help fund voter choice. I'm not a fan of the two-party system, and voter choice helps get candidates on the ballot, and we are good at it. His North Carolina organization came to us for help. We helped, no cost to them, so I don't feel bad that he can't get off the ballot. So Cubans are taking a victory lap on that one because the RFK Jr. campaign was trying really hard to get on the ballot in all of these states. And then when you flip for Trump, you can't get off of it because it's late in the game. That could really, I think that could really, really hurt Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Hard to think of a
Yeah,
scenario.
I think that's absolutely right. Yeah, because if you go in, because his job, he's not going to make himself more popular, Trump. He's going to make Kamala Harris less popular. That's his goal. And, she's going to try to tear him down, but, views are kind of baked in on him. So by the time people go into the booth, a lot of them are going to hate both. And if RFK Jr.'s name is there, then maybe.
Right. Well, when we're planning the show out, just a little inside baseball here, we come up with topics that we think, will make good blocks for 15 minutes, something like that. And we just turned a block on an Instagram post from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez into
with apologies.
half-hour discussion about Ryan's history of the Green Party, which was so interesting, actually, and I'm very glad
cut all
we
that.
did it. Yeah, it's all gone. You'll never see it. Hey, if you liked that video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Breaking Points.
If you want to see the rest of Counterpoints, go to breakingpoints.com to become a premium member and get the full uncut show every morning in your inbox and on Spotify.